Hello my love when I saw my uncle with that uncovered tool I could not stand it. I never imagined that a simple visit to my uncle's house could change my life so drastically. Julia, 25 years old, always was the right girl of the family, focused on studies at work, always following the rules. But that summer everything changed. The decision to visit my uncle Roberto was almost impulsive. I was exhausted after an intense year in the marketing company where I worked, dealing with difficult clients and impossible deadlines, when my mother suggested that I take a vacation. The idea of spending a few weeks at Uncle Roberto's beach house seemed perfect. My uncle, my mother's younger brother, lived in a coastal city a few hours away. He was the kind of cool uncle that everyone wanted to have successful fun, and always with interesting stories to tell. At 42 years old, to a bachelor, he led a life that many envied. The trip there was quiet, with the landscape gradually changing from buildings and concrete to green fields, and finally the blue of the ocean. The smell of the sea could be felt even before reaching the city, bringing memories of summers past and promises of relaxing days ahead. When I finally parked in front of his house, I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement that I could not explain. The house, it was exactly as I remembered it, a modern two-story building with large glass windows that reflected the sky and the sea. Roberto greeted me with a warm hug. Julia, how good to see you, niece. His smile was contagious, and I could not help but notice how well he was for his age. He brought, as an architect in the water sports, he practiced regularly, kept his body toned and tend. Uncle Roberto, how long? I responded, returning the hug. For a moment I felt something strange, a heat that was not just from the summer sun. I moved away, thought, attributing them to the trip. The house was a dream, spacious, modern, with a dazzling view of the ocean. The interior was a harmonious mix of light wood, glass, and shades of blue that reflected the sea. Outside, Roberto showed me the guest room where I would stay, a cozy space with a large window facing the ocean. I hope you are comfortable, he said, placing my suitcase on the bed. If you need anything, just let me know. I spent a few minutes unpacking and getting acquainted. I know you would be hungry after the trip, he commented, stirring a pot on the stove. I am making a makika. I hope you like it. It seems great, I replied, sitting on one of the high stools at the kitchen counter. I watched him cook, noticing how he moved with grace and confidence. There was something fascinating in seeing this domestic side of my uncle, always so adventurous. During dinner we talked about our lives. I told him about my job, the challenges and frustrations. Roberto listened intently, offering from time to time some advice or sharing his own experiences. Sometimes, Julia, we need to take a step back to see the bigger picture, he said, filling our glasses with wine. Maybe this vacation is exactly what you need to reassess things. I nodded, feeling grateful to have someone to talk to so openly. As the night went on and the wine flowed, our conversation became more personal. Roberto talked about his past relationships, about the reasons why he never got married. I think I've always been looking for something more, he confessed, his eyes meeting mine over the wine glass. Something I've never been able to define exactly. There was an intensity in his gaze that made me avert my eyes, feeling a heat rising through me. Neck, I attributed that feeling to the wine and the intimate conversation, but a part of me knew something else was going on. The first few days were quiet and pleasant. We spent time talking, walking along the beach, and Roberto showed me the tourist spots in the city. We visited a small local art gallery where he explained to me different styles and techniques. His knowledge and passion for art impressed me, but there was something in the air, a subtle tension that I could not decipher. Sometimes I would catch Roberto watching me with an expression I could not understand. Other times it was our touches that seemed to last a little longer than necessary. A hand on the back when crossing a busy street, fingers that brushed as we passed the salt. During dinner, it was on the third night when things began to change more visibly. Roberto suggested that we have a wine on the terrace, enjoying the sunset, the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, reflecting in the calm sea, creating a stunning setting. You know, Julia began with a lower voice than usual. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right decision to stay single. I looked at him, surprised by the sudden confession. How come, uncle? He took a long sip of wine before answering, his eyes fixed on the horizon. I see you so young and full of life. It makes me think of what could have been if I had followed a different path, maybe having started a family. I felt my heart racing. There was something in the way he looked at me that made me feel different, not like a niece but like a woman. It was a look that mixed admiration, desire, and a pinch of guilt. You are still young, uncle, I answered with a trembling voice. It is never too late to change. He smiled, a kind of smile I had never seen before, a little sad, a little hopeful. Maybe you are right, but some changes, some decisions, can complicate things. The silence that followed was charged with something I couldn't name: tension, desire, fear. We finished the wine in silence, watching the stars that began to appear in the sky. When we finally got up to go in, I felt Roberto's hand on my back, guiding me. The touch, although innocent, it made me shudder. The next morning I woke up to the sound of the waves. The sun came through the cracks in the curtain, creating dancing patterns on the floor of the room. For a moment I lay, remembering the conversation from the night before, trying to understand what was happening between my uncle and me. I decided I needed to clear my mind. I put on a bikini and decided to take a dip in the sea before breakfast. When I left the room, I ran into Roberto coming out of the bathroom wearing only a towel around my waist. Our eyes met, and for a moment time seemed to stop. Drops of water fell down his defined chest, and I couldn't help but feel my eyes followed his route. When I looked back at his face, I saw him watching me intensely. His eyes retraced my body in a way that made me blush. Good morning, he said with a hoarse voice. Good morning, I replied, feeling my face getting hot. I quickly passed next to him, my body lightly brushing his due to the narrow hallway. The contact, although brief, made me shudder completely. I could perceive his scent, a mixture of soap, aftershave, lotion, and something that was uniquely his, and that awoke sensations I had never experienced before. At the beach, I tried to concentrate on the waves in the sun, on anything that was not the image of my uncle, half naked, but it was useless. Something had changed, and I did not know how to handle it. Part of me felt guilty for having these thoughts about my own uncle. Another part, a part that I barely recognized, longed to explore these new feelings. When I returned home, Roberto was in the kitchen making breakfast. The smell of fresh coffee and toasted bread filled the air. He greeted me with a smile, but there was a new tension in his as I thought we could have a picnic today. He suggested placing a cup of coffee in front of me. I know, a more secluded beach, perfect for relaxing. The idea of being alone with him in a secluded place made me nervous, but at the same time strangely excited. My heart raced, and I felt a tingling in my stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. Sure sounds great, I replied, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out higher than normal. Roberto nodded, his eyes meeting mine for a moment before turning his attention to the stove grate. I'm going to prepare some things to take. I spent the morning helping Roberto make sandwiches and pack fruit and drinks for the picnic. Every time our arms brushed or our hands touched when having the same object, I felt an electric current run through my body. The air between us seemed charged, full of unspoken words and repressed desires. We reached the beach after a short walk. Roberto was right. The place was paradisiacal: white sand, crystal clear waters, and there was no one in sight. The palm trees gently swayed, with the sea breeze creating dancing shadows. On the sand we spread the picnic blanket and began to eat. The conversation flowed naturally, as always, but there was a new tension in the air, and electricity I had never felt before. We talked about work, about dreams for the future, about past relationships. With every word, every look, the atmosphere between us became more charged. You have changed, Julia commented Roberto suddenly, with his eyes fixed on me. You are no longer that girl I used to play in the yard. I felt my heart speed up. People change, uncle. He brought the distance between us a little closer, decreasing dangerously. Yes, they change, and sometimes the relationships between them also need to change. I looked at him, unsure of what to say. His eyes were fixed on mine, intense and full of something I had never seen before: desire, but also fear, guilt, and a deep tenderness. Slowly he raised his hand and touched my face, his thumb gently caressing my Cheek, uncle, I whispered, but I did not move away. My body seemed to move of its own while leaning into his caressing. He murmured, coming closer, don't think, just feel. His lips found mine, and in that moment the whole world disappeared. The kiss began soft, almost hesitant, as if Roberto was giving me the opportunity to pull back, but soon it became more intense. Years of repressed desire exploding. Suddenly my hands found his chest, yes, Endo, the firm muscles under the shirt, the theirs explored my body, touching places that no one had touched before. Each caress sent waves of pleasure throughout my being, awakening sensations I didn't know existed. When we parted, I gasped before I saw the desire burning in his eyes. But there was also worry, guilt, fear of the consequences of what we were about to do. Doing this is wrong. You murmur my words, longing for more, maybe. He answered with a hoarse voice, but I've never felt so alive. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of caresses, kisses, and explorations. Our bodies joined and separated like waves on the beach, a rhythm as old as time itself. The sand stuck to our sweaty skin, the sun warmed us, and the sound of the sea drowned our moans. It was as if we had released a floodgate of emotions and sensations, repressed for a long time. Each touch, each kiss was a discovery. Roberto guided me with sweetness and passion, showing me pleasures that I had never experienced before. In a moment of lucidity, I thought about how this would affect our family, our lives. But then Roberto touched me in a way that made my thoughts dissolve, and I would get lost in the passion of the moment again. As the sun began to set, tinting the sky in shades of gold and pink, we finally broke apart, sitting side by side, staring at the horizon. The weight of what we had done began to fall upon us. What is happening now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, my mind a whirl of conflicting emotions. Ecstasy, guilt, fear, love. Roberto sighed, running his hand through his hair. His eyes, when they turned to me, were filled with emotion. I don't know, Julia, this complicates things. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat, the reality of what we had done settling in. No one can know. No. His voice agreed, heavy. It would destroy our family. We returned home in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The atmosphere in the house had changed completely. Where before there was comfort and familiarity, there was now tension and pent-up desire. The days that followed were sweet torture. We tried to act normal, but every glance, every accidental touch was loaded with meaning. During the day we kept up a facade of normality. We took walks around the city, we cooked together, we watched movies, but there was an undercurrent of sexual tension that threatened to explode at any moment. At night I could hear him walking down the hall, pausing briefly in front of my door before continuing. Several times I was on the verge of opening it to invite him in, but I always hesitated, torn between desire and guilt. One night I couldn't take it anymore. I left my room and found him in the kitchen, drinking water. Our eyes met, and without saying a word we moved closer. The kiss was desperate, full of desire and guilt. We made love right there on the kitchen counter, with our clothes scattered on the floor. It was wrong, it was forbidden, but it was intense and passionate like nothing I had experienced before. Roberto touched me as if I were the most precious thing in the world. Each caress, a mixture of reverence and burning desire. Later, lying on the living room couch, Roberto stroked my hair. The silence between us was heavy, full of unspoken words. This can't continue, he finally said, but his voice had no conviction. I know, I answered, but I cuddled closer to him, not wanting the moment to end. The days passed. An hour, passion only grew. Each moment alone was a chance to explore each other, on the beach, in the pool, in the dark corners of the house. No place was safe from her desire. It was as if we were trying to make up for all the lost time, for all the years we spent repressing these feelings we didn't even know existed. But reality was always there, giving us what we were. Making my mother's calls, asking how the visit was going, filled me with guilt. The family photos on the wall seemed to stare at us with accusation. Guilt and desire warred within me, leaving me confused and divided. A week before the end of my visit, Roberto took me for a boat ride away from the coast, with only the sea around us. He finally broached the subject we had been avoiding. Julia began, her eyes serious. What we're doing, it's dangerous. If anyone finds out. I know, I interrupted him, feeling tears starting to form in my eyes, but I can't stop thinking about you, of wanting you, he sighed, running his hand over his face. So do I, but we have to think about the future, the consequences. This is not, it's just about. We stayed silent for a moment, just the sound of the waves hitting the hull of the boat, the breeze. Marina ruffled our hair, and the sun shone brightly as if it mocked the darkness of our thoughts. What if, and what if we escaped? Was the idea, but desperate for a solution. Roberto looked at me, surprised. Escape where to? Any place far from here where no one knows us, where we can be together without hiding. For a moment I saw a flash of consideration in his eyes. The idea of a new life far from everything, and everyone, free to love each other openly, was tempting. But then he shook his head, reason prevailing over desire. We can't, Julia. We have our lives, our families. We can't just abandon it all. Think about your mother, your friends, your future. The tears began to run down my face. So what do we do? How can we just stop? He pulled me closer, hugging me tightly. I felt his own tears wetting my hair. I don't know. Maybe this has to stay like a memory, something special that we shared. But that cannot continue. I cried in his arms, feeling as if my heart was breaking. The idea of returning to my normal life, of not feeling his caresses, his kisses again, seemed unbearable. But I knew deep down that he was right. What we had was forbidden. It was impossible to continue. In the real world, we made love once again on that boat, slowly and passionately, knowing that it could be the last time. Each caress, each kiss, each sigh was like a farewell. We tried to record in our memory every detail of the other, each sensation, each emotion. The last days of my visit were bittersweet. I took advantage of every moment together, but always with the shadow of the farewell lurking over us. At night we met in secret, our bodies joining in a silent dance of passion and desperation. The day before my departure, we stayed up all night, talking, loving each other, trying to delay the inevitable. We talked about our lives, our dreams, the possibilities that would never be realized. We laughed and cried, we hugged and kissed, as if we could stop time with the force of our will. When the time came to say goodbye, the hug lasted longer than it should have. Roberto held me tightly, as if he didn't want to let me go. Take care, Julia, he said with a broken voice. Be happy. You too, uncle, I replied, feeling as tears ran down my face. The word uncle sounded strange in my mouth, a cruel reminder of the reality of our situation. I got in the car and began to drive, looking in the rearview mirror until Roberto's figure disappeared in the distance. My heart was heavy, torn between the love I felt and the guilt that consumed me. As I drove back home to my normal life, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Those weeks had changed everything. It was no longer the same Julia who arrived at that house by the sea. She was different, marked by an experience she could never share with anyone. The future was uncertain. How I would handle family encounters. How could I look at my mother knowing what she had done with her brother and Roberto? Would we be able to keep our distance, or would desire end up bringing us closer again? As the road unfolded before me, I realized I had no answers. I only knew that that summer, that visit to my uncle's house, had changed my life forever, and for better or worse I would have to live with the consequences of my decisions. The only certainty I had was that whatever happened, the memories of those passionate days by the sea would remain with me forever. Always a burning secret kept deep in my heart, always reminding me that sometimes love comes up in the most unexpected places, defying all the rules. And so with a heavy heart and a mind full of memories, I moved on, leaving my uncle's house behind, but taking with me a summer I could never forget. A summer that had taught me about love, desire, guilt, and the high price we sometimes pay for our passions. As the city was left behind me, I wondered if one day I could look back without feeling that mixture of longing and regret. If one day I could think of Roberto without my heart racing, without my body craving his touch. But for now, all I could do is keep driving, letting the sea breeze take my tears away, hoping that somehow in time I could find peace with what had happened, and maybe only that, maybe find a way to live with this impossible love that was now part of me. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with the same colors that had witnessed our first kiss, and I knew with a certainty that scared me and comforted me at the same time, that a part of me would always belong to that beach, to that house, to that man, a secret that I would carry with me forever, an eternal summer, kept in my heart,